Singapore's journey from a resource-poor island to a global economic powerhouse is often cited as a modern miracle. Decades ago, Singapore faced daunting challenges, high unemployment, ethnic tensions, and a lack of natural resources. Yet through deliberate institutional engineering, political discipline, and a culture of accountability, Singapore built one of the world's cleanest governments and most competitive economies. Transformation was not accidental. It was the result of strong leadership, long-term planning, and a relentless focus on efficiency and integrity. This scene set the stage for understanding why Singapore's model attracts global attention and why many developing nations, including Sri Lanka, look to it for inspiration. As we explore this story, we'll see how governance, not just economic policy, can shape a nation's destiny. Sri Lanka, with its strategic location and educated population, should be poised for prosperity. However, the country has repeatedly faced economic crises, political instability, and persistent corruption. Patronage politics, politicized institutions, and weak regulatory enforcement have undermined public trust and investor confidence. The 2022 economic collapse exposed deep structural weaknesses: excessive debt, poor fiscal management, and unsustainable subsidy. Like Singapore, Sri Lanka's governance has struggled to maintain consistency and credibility. This scene explores how these challenges have hindered Sri Lanka's development and why reform is urgently needed. The comparison highlights that economic success is not just about resources, but about building institutions that citizens trust and investors respect. And Sri Lanka simply copy Singapore's anti-corruption and economic governance framework? The answer is complex. Institutions operate within unique political and cultural ecosystems. Singapore's success relied on strong enforcement, meritocracy, and consistent leadership. Sri Lanka's environment is more fragmented, with entrenched interests and resistance to reform. However, some elements are transferable: digital governance, transparent procurement, asset declarations, and merit-based recruitment. Reform requires political courage, public support, and sustained pressure. Cultural change is gradual, but institutional reforms can reshape expectations over time. This scene examines which aspects of Singapore's model are realistically adaptable for Sri Lanka, and why careful, context-sensitive reform is essential for lasting progress. Sri Lanka's path forward involves a practical reform roadmap. In the short term, digitalization and procurement transparency can reduce corruption opportunities. Strengthening audit systems and modernizing tax administration will improve fiscal sustainability. Medium-term reforms focus on civil service professionalization, SOE governance, and education alignment with global trends. Long-term transformation requires building public trust, administrative professionalism, and policy continuity. The process is gradual, demanding political courage and institutional persistence. This scene outlines how Sri Lanka can sequence reforms, adapt lessons from Singapore, and build a governance culture that supports sustainable economic growth. The ultimate goal is not imitation but adaptation, developing a uniquely Sri Lankan model that incorporates the most relevant lessons. Enduring lesson from Singapore's experience is clear: governance quality profoundly shapes economic outcomes. Strong institutions, credible enforcement, meritocracy, and transparency are universal principles that drive national prosperity. While Sri Lanka cannot replicate Singapore's model wholesale, it can adapt core lessons to its own context. Form is difficult and often faces resistance, but the alternative, continued institutional weakness and recurring crises, is far more costly. By focusing on institutional credibility, administrative professionalism, and long-term planning, Sri Lanka can build a foundation for sustainable growth. This final scene encourages reflection on the importance of governance and the need for persistent, context-sensitive reform to secure a brighter future.